First introduced in 2008, the Asia Young Designer Awards, or AYDA, is part of Nippon Paint's commitment to helping nurture the next generation of architectural and interior design talents. The program aims to help designers of the future develop both technical skills and empathic design capacity through cross-learning and networking opportunities with key industry players. AYDA is more than just a competition platform. Exposure from the AYDA program enables participants to gain practical industry knowledge experience through intensive coaching, mentoring and skill-building sessions by experienced educators and industry leaders, thus further establishing AYDA as a unique platform for designers of the future. "13 years in the making, AYDA has grown to be one of Asia's largest and longest-running award across 15 geographical locations, reaching out to more than 1,000 international educational institutions and more than 150,000 students across Asia. With the help of our partners, industry associations and stakeholders, AYDA has received more than 35,000 entries since its conception."
Take a trip with Destination Design, where top architects and interior designers bring you on an exclusive tour of iconic landmarks around Asia.
This beautiful rain tree right here was a source of inspiration for the school's name and is one of 2 such clusters on the premise.
The formerly abandoned warehouses have been refurbished into a creative hub. The 50-story Cocoon Tower is an iconic site in Tokyo's Shinjuku district.
There are so many good architects in the world. Everybody is very talented. So how do you differentiate yourself? With your passion and also with your storytelling.
很多以前我们总以为把东西做得美美的就好，会发现其实不是，要看到面对事情的真实那一面，然后去研究人跟空间的关系，这个是后来我们慢慢从工作过程中发现，去找到好问题这很重要。
My generation would come and go, but then their generations are also the ones who could come and turn the tide. Because to me, we're at the stage where architecture needs to be a lot more sustainable than maybe decades before.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brandon, and welcome to our International Exchange webinar. I'm part of the organizing committee at Asia Young Designer Awards, and on behalf of Nippon Paint and AYDA, I would like to extend our warmest welcome to all of you who are joining us on Zoom and on YouTube Live. So, due to the pandemic restrictions worldwide, we've migrated a lot of our efforts online, and this is our second International Exchange webinar, and we would love to hear from you at the end of the session through a survey form. And during the session, we will also have polls, because we want to hear from you what kind of topics or what kind of things would you like to learn from our experienced speakers from all around the world. Now, I would love to introduce, joining us today, I have architect Siritip, the co-founder and executive director at GreenDwell, and also architect Suhasini, principal architect at Auroville Centre for Scientific Research. Hello, hi guys. Thank you so much for joining us in this session where we can get really up close and really personal with you. In getting to learn more about sustainable design from your journey. Maybe both of you can start off by sharing, where are you now? Tell us more about your home. We just really want to get into basically your shoes in that sense. Maybe architect Suhasini, are you sitting at your home at the moment?
Yes, I'm doing this from my home. I'm doing this from my home because my office is a bit like a railway station. There are people coming and going all the time. We are not a typical architecture office. We work with everybody in different levels. So we have masons coming in, we have the contractors coming in, we have people who are carpenters coming in, And then I have clients also, and it's an open plan office where there's no cubicle, no partitions, nothing, because the structure of my office is everybody is the boss and everybody is the underling. So you have to take responsibility for your decisions. And when you don't know, you have to be responsible enough to say that you don't know. Because if you don't say that you don't know, you will never learn. So the culture of my office is such that if I have to do a thing like today, I don't have silence. And there's always people moving around. So it's like a kindergarten of architects, carpenters, masons. So
kindergarten sounds like a great place to work. Yeah. Thank you, Architect Suhasini. How about you, Architect Siritip? I spotted some cute stickers behind.
Yes, actually. Actually, we're not under quarantine restrictions in Bangkok right now, but the reason I need to speak from home is because I have a knee injury. So that means I'm stuck at home, and what you see right now is the bookshelf of my son. So that's why you see those cute stickers. So please don't mind that.
No, I think it's great. It looks wonderful. Yeah, and I hope you recover soon and
Thank
you know, and then don't get injured again, really. So like I mentioned before in my invitation to both our amazing speakers, today it's really an up-close personal journey over tea and coffee. Everyone else can please make tea and coffee as well. And what's most importantly is I would love to hear from you. How would you break down the big term sustainability? Because it has morphed into such a buzzword over the past years. And you know, a lot of people are very afraid to try and ask questions, you know, because I think it's also in an industry that's so competitive, people don't want to appear like someone who has not read enough, who has not done enough research, who's not done enough efforts, right? But it's also, you know, because the world is changing so fast, there's so many things we don't know, right? So I would love to hear from you. And, you know, I think this is a safe space for us to ask questions as well. So through your journey in sharing your insights and experience, we will encourage all our participants from around the world to also pop by you guys can pop in your questions through the chat box so I can compile for our speakers later. All right, so we can start today's session. My very first question to both our speakers, who would like to go first, or we just take turns, or as and when you guys feel like it, yeah?
Okay.
Just all casual. Okay, so the first question is, how did you get into the world of sustainability, right? Allow me to elaborate a little bit, because I think when we study as an architect or as a designer, there are green components and sustainable components in our studies, right? But what makes you get into it and make that your bread and butter? Yeah, who would like to go first?
Okay, I go first. You see, the word sustainability as a buzzword and almost as a very overused jargon is something that has come in only in the last 2.5 decades. When I studied architecture, this was not a buzzword. People didn't care about it. We were still under the influence, because I studied in the 80s, you know. So I'm like the grandmother of you guys when it comes to this thing. And at that time, the world was still, architecture was still a individualistic expression of creativity, and I would say even in quote unquote, a male-dominated profession. And in a manner where there was a very clear hierarchy of a designer, the master designer, who is in charge, and everybody else would be like doing his bidding in a very stratified structure in the office. And architecture was also taught as an individualistic act of creation. So you really learned, this was like after the international movement, postmodern, it was still architecture and development was not really an interconnected, integrated field where there was a role and responsibility to the environment around. I did study a bit of, urban planning, in which we looked at environment, but looked at environment more as a resource to be exploited in the planning. How did I come to sustainability? I didn't come to sustainability thinking about sustainability as an issue, as a concept that I had to integrate. My life journey after I finished architecture was, I moved from the capital of India, which is New Delhi, where I was living and studying, and my parents and my family, to a remote area in southern India along the coast, in one of the most economically depressed rural setting, where there was hardly any missionary. Most of the places that I was lived in the first 10 years, we didn't have electricity. I didn't have a toilet. It was more a hole in the ground, and you spent a lot of time outdoors. So when I started my practice, I really had to design whatever I designed. It started with little storerooms and a small room for a Dutch lady who was living under a tree and things like that. As how can I make a shelter where I don't need too many other things, like there would be no water on site, there would be no electricity on site. The mason was actually a part-time mason because he was a farmer, subsistence farmer. There were no tools, even things like a hammer and a screwdriver is not there. How do you design with this, with local materials? Doing this over a period of 6-7 years, where you had to take care of your waste, you had to take care of your own environment, and you had to make sure that the building was resilient and would withstand the tropical cyclones and stuff like that. You became sustainable because you were dependent on working together with nature and not in conflict with nature. It was only in the early 90s when I won the International Architecture for the Poor. And I said, but I was not building for the poor. It is just I was using a methodology that anybody, whether it's poor or rich, could live with. Self-build, use people with semi-skills, build with whatever is at hand. And over time, I got to know somewhere in the mid-90s that, I was doing sustainable architecture. That my architecture was climatic design, that what I was doing with my sewage and water supply was actually net zero, that I was trapping the rainwater and recycling my sewage was net zero. And many of the things, this was pre-internet days, I would get small pamphlets that I would find when I was visiting family in Delhi, UNDP office or in somebody's office, photocopy them and come back and try it with. My first sewage treatment plant was just because I found 3 pages in some book and I photocopied it and came back home and built it. That's how it is.
Yeah. I like how you started your practice even before the buzzword even exists. Like it's like you meet the buzzword halfway. Oh, so you are sustainability. Nice to meet you.
No, somebody else told me, that is sustainability. I met it and I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Also, I think that's also great because I think what you highlighted is really how to be dependent with an environment and how to you yourself as an individual become a sustainable person or a consumer to begin with, and then the rest will come with it, right? So that is from the 80s till today. Let's hear from Siritip. How do you get into it? Yeah.
Okay, I think mine was in the 90s. I think at the time the term sustainability has been set into place, but not that solid. And the internet is not really, you can't, because these days when you Google sustainability, you see thousands of websites and you don't know where to start. But during those days, this term is very academically defined. And what I had in my class during my undergrad in my architecture school, the class is not called sustainable design like they are today. It's just called something like environmental technology, building environmental technology, and how you deal with that. And then under that subject, under that subtopic, there is a topic that talks about bioclimatic design, how you deal with sun, wind, and light, and the response locally, for Thailand. And then when I was studying it, I felt like there were some solutions that are generally practiced in our country. And it seems to me like it is a one-size-fits-all solution, meaning that, okay, you are living in a hot and humid climate, so this is what you do, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I feel that if I follow all those 1, 2, 3, 4 things, then it's not fun anymore. Because design shouldn't be limited to certain things, but I don't have enough knowledge to, well, I understand the why, that I know I wanted to do something for the better of the environment, but I don't know the how enough to be able to create something of my own. So after my undergrad, I decided to pursue my master's degree in, it's not called sustainable design. I was trying to look for something, and then there are some courses under that degree that has sustainable design as a subject. And at that time, I'm not really sure what sustainable design even means. It just seems like something good that I should be doing, but I just wanted to know more about how I could go at it in terms of design, so I could have more freedom in my design by also being also responsible to my design. But in my master's study, it is more a research based, meaning you have the courses that you like, you know more, and by going to the States, it gives me more breadth, also depth. The breadth is because you are exposed to different climates. You are studying, you see friends from India, from China, from Europe, and you understand that there are different climate characteristics and different contexts that you need to work with and different solutions. So I was exposed to a lot of solutions that I think it gives me freedom. And as I understand more about this background knowledge of, I have a lot of choice to do it based on the climate and the context that I have, then I feel that I don't think I know enough, but at least I know more than I was before. And then I wanted to start to work. But then when you are in a research-based, I see discrepancies between, a research environment and a design environment. They are usually really separated. Kids in research, they don't really associate with design and design, you don't really get the research implemented in your design because it seems very technical. So I intended to sort of merge these two together when I work. So I started off working in Hong Kong in an architecture firm because I wanted to know how I could use this knowledge in design. I didn't know where to start at the time. So I work as an in-house sustainable design resource at the firm. So mostly I didn't get to really design, but helping the design team, figure out design solutions and testing and running some simulations. But as I was doing that, I felt that I could do more. So me and my husband, we decided to come back. We think it was 10 or so years ago. We think it's about time that we come back to our own country and start a firm of our own, trying to sort of merge these discrepancies that I see, because I see that it still exists. And even today, it still exists. We wanted to integrate the research part into the design. Research could be like simulations or getting to know your climate or your context more rather than just using the rules of thumbs. So that's how we began this firm.
Thank you so much for sharing. So what I really like to recap is really the how the whole sustainable thing became a thing, right? From the 80s, it wasn't a thing. From the 90s, it's like starting to be a thing, and then in the 21st century, it becomes the thing. That it's so, and when it becomes the thing, like a lot of popular things, it becomes mythical. It becomes too big to chew. It becomes like you said, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a rigid formula to it, right? So I would really love to hear from both of you is from your experience and your context that you work in, especially in India and in Auroville and also in Bangkok and Thailand. How would you break down such a big word, especially in your own practice like now, like that's directly relevant, maybe in the Thailand context and the India context? How would you break down the buzzword so that it's relevant to the ones who are practicing? Because, for example, from our audience, there are people from across the world, yes, but I want to hear as examples, right? Like you mentioned just now, is working locally, working relevant to the people and etc. So can you guys elaborate a bit further how you want to break down these buzzwords for our participants today? Yeah, Architect Suhasini.
Okay, I will tell you actually through a story how I break it down. When I would say when I kind of formally set up my practice, and I realized there is so many different aspects that interlink when you create human settlements. And many of these other aspects that most of us as architects are not familiar with, do not take it into account. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s, you didn't have consultants for everything. And you did not have such a fragmented specialization with everybody having a narrow bandwidth of their input in planning and design. So you also have to understand that India as a country we have a diversity in terms of language, culture, which everybody is very aware of. I mean, we have more diversity of language than European Union. We have more diversity of cultures than European Union, North America, and South America put together. And we have the highest population in the world. So now you imagine in this kind of scenario, the kind of work that an architect does is not really making an impact because most people self-build. The government builds for itself, and most of the people, when they have a little bit of money or financing, they build their own house, they get a plot of land. So the organized sector where design comes in is mostly institutional and commercial projects and formalized housing projects, okay? For the rest, if you want to put in sustainability into a very coherent system, it's rich people's houses. You're not, I mean, these are the only 4 aspects that you can get in as an architect. And in India, firstly, living in a situation where I'm in rural area, I was a woman in a male's profession at that time. And I didn't have a godfather who was going to network me into a connection so that you get to meet the right people, because you might have a good website, you might have a portfolio, you might have topped your school and university, but everything works with personal contact in India, and it still does. Actually, paying for a website is a waste of time in India still for architects. Websites are for architects to look at architects' work. So in this kind of scenario, I realized that architecture is very much a profession that needs patronage. Now, if you're an artist, you can make a series of paintings that you show, and people see your creativity. If you're a writer, you need to get an advance, and if the book sells, you do this. But if you're an architect, there are not so many people going to say, hey, Suhasini, come, do me this project and show me what you're capable of. It's not happening. So how do you go about it? Meanwhile, I was living in a place which is called Auroville. I'm still living there. It's an international city in making. We have people from about 50 countries of the world living here permanently, and we have a very rich diversity of activity, people, languages, and everything. And this in itself attracts people from all over the country to come and see what is the zoo of all kind of people living here, okay? So what I did is, instead of waiting for patronage, instead of waiting for people to give me a project, and this is something that I do since the beginning of my profession, I look at what is it that we need to do, and what is it that the government or the private sector is interested in investing, and what is it that the people need to have. And I put this together as a project, write it up as a proposal, get the funding as an innovation, research and demonstration, and post-occupancy, data collection and analysis, so that each project then becomes an applied research project, which has donors who are interested in certain aspect of sustainability. And then there are users who, because it's not privately owned, are more interested to listen to how to change functioning and lifestyle and things like that, because they're also not owners of the building. The people who pay for the buildings are not owners of the building. And me as an architect, I'm not just doing the design of the building. I'm actually trying to bring in a whole socio-economic angle into it, along with all the technology and the design part. So then sustainability for me, the way I've always looked at it is, sustainability doesn't mean that it is static. Nothing in life is static. Nothing is going to be pure water, pure air, and pure life. It's not going to be. It's a cycle. It keeps changing. Now, how do you make sure that the cycle, as it changes, is constantly creating a certain quality that permits all other interlinked aspects, whether it's biodiversity or clean air or, safe neighborhoods or net zero buildings or building materials that have low embodied energy, living spaces that are harmonious so that psychological well-being is assured. Because sustainability, when it's just computer simulations and figures and data and analysis, is very nice. But this does not create a society that is collaborative. This does not create a society that is equitable. And it does not create a society that is inclusive. Because finally, for me, sustainability means that there is a certain aspect of human nature which has been exploitative and has gone too far in another direction. And now to just use technology and tools and science to bring it back is not going to change it, because our blind reliance on technology, tools, and science first brought us here. We have to understand technologies, tools, and science are not the solutions. They're just a methodology. Today's methodology may be computer simulations. Tomorrow's methodology may be something else. And day after tomorrow's methodology. So the intrinsic part of my practice in sustainability is actually to bring four aspects together, which are society, economy, technology, and environment, into a certain balance and harmony. And whatever is needed in terms of tools, apply it, but don't get attached to the tool. Because if you get attached to the tool, then if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you will continue to go hitting everything else. Because for you, because you're such an expert with your hammer, only thing you see is a nail. And this is, when I teach sustainability also, I tell people, look, somehow we forget that it is only in the last, especially in Asia, it's only in the last 100 years, we have access to fossil fuel, which has given birth to tools, technologies, electromechanical engineering, and others things. But Asia always had, and I'm very serious here, I'm not just talking about South Asia, which is the 6-7 countries around India, including India, but entire Southeast Asia and other parts. We always had a high density of population. We always had a diversity of culture, and we have an enormous diversity of, how do I call, biogeography. There are mountains, there are islands, there are seashores, there's, but people lived with a certain self-sufficiency, and they developed rich cultural output. And this was because there was an integration between man and nature that knew how to sustainably produce what was needed today and not just store for a security of tomorrow while indulging in some kind of an imitative consumerism to elevate your status. So every time you look at settlements that are pre-independence, like say in India, they lived without electrical fans, lights, bore wells, sewage treatment plants, street lights, machine-made clothing and all that. And they had a very rich life. So I'm not asking you to recreate or imitate, but look at the methodology that allowed them to do it and now transfer that into today's needs and today's environment and today's economy, and try to find the same balance, so that there are smaller cycles within larger cycles, that each one's waste is another one's resource, and another one's resource is this one's waste, so that everything fits in and is constantly like an octopus, moving, fluid, and camouflaging and standing out. And it's like, an environment that is, you are part of it, you're not dominating it. And this is somehow, I feel, in today's world, when I see the number of women who are in the field of planning and architecture, I think it's very symptomatic, because this quality to adapt and yet control comes more naturally to women than to men. It is control and command. It's adapt to control is more the feminine thing, because both genders want control. And my direction is forget about control, adapt and collaborate. The minute we adapt and collaborate, a green building is not an isolated island. A green building is in a green neighborhood, in a green city, on a green planet, and then we don't need so many barriers which have to be tested with simulations to see if the barriers work.
Thank you so much for your story and your inputs and your insights, and most importantly, your opinion about. I think you've brought it multiple times as well. Is in especially when you first started, is a male-dominated industry, and then now it's not I purposely do it. I just happen to have two female speaker icons today with us. Yeah, but yes, I think it does resonate. I think there is also more opportunity for collaboration in this generation compared to command and conquer in a way. Yeah. Siritip, over to you. How would you break it
Yes.
down? And then also on top of breaking it down, it's also there's one part I would love to know more. It's about your transition from research to practice. You know, what are like
Okay.
some of the challenges? I'll nudge you later. You can just go with
Okay.
the flow.
Okay. Well, I'm actually speechless after hearing A.R. Suhasini's reply. It was a very, very great response to sustainability. To me, I as if we're talking to a newer generation of the students, I think architects play a role in balancing. So I think when we talk about sustainable design, architect has a role that you need to strike a balance between, not between, but a balance when you're designing with the environment while also considering the people. Because I think it's the relationship between these two things. Because usually sustainable design, when people talk about it these days, they talk about the environment. You know, they talk about energy, material in isolation,
Exactly.
waste, water. But then sometimes you also forget that there's also the people, the human side of it. And I think that's the purpose that architecture, we are serving people mostly, except some special types of buildings. So that being said, as architects, I think you are the ones who strike a balance between, let's say for a certain specific project, how do you balance between doing the good things for the environment, while also you need to also serve the people. Are you improving their quality of life? How about their well-being, their wellness? How do they live in such a space? So I think it's a focus that is, you could say that is focused outside of yourself. So not focusing on you as an architect who designed a building, but focusing outside, having empathy onto the environment and the people. I think that is how I would talk about sustainability.
It's not about you, it's about the people, and it's not just
about others.
About others, yes.
Because I think as architects, usually you would put yourself into a space that you design.
Yeah.
I would walk in, I would imagine this would go that way, and I would decide that this should be that way. But if you were imagining that you're not the ones going to spend your time living there, but who is going to live there? That's one element of it. And then how much that is going to impact the environment. So I think we need to balance it out, and then it's different in different projects.
Yeah. So, Architect Siritip, can you elaborate a little bit from your research to practice? Because you mentioned when you after your postgraduate, you went to Hong Kong, you started off as a consultant, you didn't actually do the design, and then when you moved back to Bangkok, and that's when you start designing together with a solution.
Yes.
So how did that journey went, and how did you thrive in that kind of what's your transition like from being full just theory to practice? Yeah, because I think this is very applicable to a lot of budding designers and architects, because we all learn theory in school, and then we get to sketch whatever we want, but when we come out, it's a very different story. Yeah, so I just want to hear from you. Yeah.
It's really hard, because when I was studying, people would say that, hey, you're in research, then you can't come back to design because you're going very technical. How could you apply that to design? But then I think I really intend to, because otherwise the whole purpose of me studying more, it's all rendered out. So, but I was lucky to have my husband with me. He was studying design, so he sort of brought me back, and then we talk about it. I mean, working here, it's like working together. You need to. It was my purpose in the beginning that I said I wanted to sort of integrate research into the design process. Because design is not a linear process. It's cyclical. So sometimes when you have you could say that similar to research, you have some assumptions or ideas that you don't know whether it would work or not. And research could help you. And sometimes just reading wouldn't help. You need to test it out by yourself, like what works and what not. And that is included cyclical in our design process.
All right.
So it is quite hard at the first place to do this, but once because it's not a typical process that you go at a certain design project, but once I started to get into the groove of doing it, then I think it leads to a different product. You could say project, or I don't want to call it product, but to simplify it, it's like a different process leads to different product. If you wanted to do something different, you have to change your process.
Yeah, I understand. We'll dive deeper into that in the later segment where you get to share your project. So before we end this segment, I have one last question to both our amazing lady icons. How do you juggle between your own sustainable direction versus what your clients demand? I know we have touched a bit of this just now. I just want Architect Suhasini and Architect Siritip to just elaborate a bit more. How do you, especially from the client point of view, because they are the one, honestly, they are the one investing, they are the one with the resources and with the cash and etc. So really, how do you juggle between your own mandate versus their demands? Yeah.
Okay. You see,
yeah.
Yes, let me go for this. It's a very,
I like to ask hard questions. Thank you so much.
No, it's not a hard question. It's a question
Okay,
that we live with every day. Actually, it's not even a question. It's something that it's like, like I talked about an octopus. It's like live in the sea. This is the water we are floating in every day. Okay.
Yeah.
I like to tell my young architects and students, because I also take on students and do internships in the office. So I always tell them, imagine a grid of 3 squares by 3 squares. You have 9 squares. Because in India, we have you have the Feng Shui, we have something called the Vastu, which I'll come to later. And you have these 9 squares, and you are sitting in the center square. And you have these other 8 elements, none of which you control. But you have to use all these 8 elements to come to a most sincerely perfect product. And it's never going to be perfect in finished, but it's perfect in process, a product that can keep adapting as the user, the client, and others grow. Now, when I have almost 50% of my projects, like I told you, are self-created as applied research projects. So I will not touch on that because they don't bring any money to the office. But so we do another 50% of projects where we work for clients. Now the clients that we work some of them are schools, so there's a board and things like that. Some of them are corporate sectors, and some of them are actually just rich people who are on the boards of the education or the corporate sector and want their house done. Okay, so these are the kind of 3 projects that we do. The amazing thing is that they come to us because they have seen what we are doing, and they've been told what we are doing, and they have friends who are impressed with what we're doing and say, oh, you want a sustainable house, you want a school that is a green building, please go to Suhasini and her team. They come, and it's like, I would almost say like a movie, So when they come and they talk, you realize there is one kind of movie in their minds of what sustainability is. And in India, one of the things that is very difficult to uncouple, it's like they're like this, sustainable green building means cheap buildings. Because they think that high-tech buildings with air conditioning, this, that, and everything is going to be expensive. And if I'm coming to you for a green building with natural light, ventilation, earth technology and everything, what I would pay 100 rupees, you should be able to give it to me for 50 rupees. And so first thing is, it's very difficult to tell them economy and environment. It doesn't mean that because you go environmental that you're going to pay less. In fact, actually, sometimes you might end up paying more in capital because you're going to spend less in operation. So we have like 4 operating principles of how we work in the office. First one is, of course, beauty and harmony, which we say that if something is not beautiful and harmonious, it can never be sustainable, And the second one is we say that it is a collaborative learning process. So whenever the clients come to us, we say, yes, that is your idea of sustainability. This is what you functionally want to do. And this is the kind of economic model that you're looking at in terms of costing and phasing and other things. So we go through a process where we try to discuss with them, make them more sensitized to become aware that when they go back home to their city or to their town, to start looking at buildings, people, roads, streets, trees in a manner which is more conscious. Because all of us as human beings, if we are still gifted with the sight that works, our optic nerves which is working, we are looking at things constantly. We have skins that feel things constantly and giving information back to our brain. We are hearing things, we're smelling things, we're tasting things, we're communicating. So we sensitize them to start looking at things a little bit more. And then the thing that we try to do, tell them is, yes, we will save you money, but we will not save you money the way you're thinking. But we will save you money by making a building which is more efficient, which will cost less to run. And because of the kind of spaces that we will build, you will need less space to be built. So that comes to our third principle, is that sustainability is not about substitution. It's not about photovoltaic energy against the grid. It's not about recycling against pumping your waste into the river. Sustainability is about living differently, which means that you can actually do more with less. Instead of a living room, which is family room, and another living room, and bedrooms which are only used for 2 hours, 2 nights a week and whatever nonsense, that's for the house. But even for the schools, we try to make the places more multi-purpose. We make the corridors into learning spaces. So we make every square meter at least use 8 to 10 hours a day, if it is a public building, rather than being used 20 hours a week. So you build less. The minute you build less, you need less cement, you need less steel, less transport, less excavation, less energy, less waste generation. And we say, this is the first step to sustainability. Reduce your need. And then we go to the next step, is do things for what you need with the least impact on other human beings, on nature, and on tools and technologies. So we try to bring the client step by step through a several process of reducing the need, re-looking at how you use things, re-looking at how they perceive space, and re-looking at how their own lifestyle and their working pattern is. Now, when it comes to the corporate sector, it's very, very difficult because you're not dealing with a client, you're dealing with a board of people.
Right.
And each one of these persons, usually in India, when you reach that level, they've all traveled west. And they all only look at material finishes, double glazing, triple glazing, and lights that go on and off when you move and all these things. And they're super impressed by that. So, but I was in Denmark last week and they told me it's only 42 kilowatts energy per square meter. I said, for how many people? There are 3 people in that space. Here you'll be 10 in that space. Metabolic energy, number of computers, traffic, and everything. You cannot just compare space to space. It's people to people, activity to activity. And moreover, what you use today as a space with people working with computers, tomorrow it'll be another space. Buildings are living and adapting things. Nothing remains the same. Spaces the way used. And there's this whole other aspect. Then you try to build awareness, make them more knowledgeable, to be informed participants in decision making, and to be also in a manner more responsible for their decisions, because a lot of clients don't take responsibility for their decisions. They want a product and they want you to give them this product in spite of their being totally not responsible between what they say they need and what they aspire to. They want a green building, but they want to live the way they've always lived. They want to have a green building, but they want to continue to operate in the middle of the summer. They want 10 people in a fully glazed building running computers. And I said, but why do you want to have that? And this is where our system of this esoteric vastu is kind of counterproductive. India, since we went through a certain reform in the early 90s, we are a market economy. So a whole section of the population has got super rich, while almost 40% of this country has got poorer than it was 30 years ago. So the disparity between the rich and the poor is such that today the cost of material, the way it is, and the cost of labor and the building is nothing compared to the cost of land in India.
Yeah.
So people are not interested, especially when it comes to urban projects that we do, whether it's housing or a corporate sector, to look at long-term change in the buildings
Yeah.
in terms of other things, you know. So we have a little bit of a problem of not just convincing people about how to think about sustainability, but how to think about economics differently between the high monetization of land, which is almost 3-4 times the cost of the building. The building may be ground plus 3, ground plus 4, but just the land below it, building cost plus operating costs over 10 years is nothing compared to what they pay in terms of land. So they don't care, you know. So we have a lot of different challenges. So when the client is making a decision, you really need to know more than design and sustainability. You need to start to understand psychology. You need to start to understand economics. You need to understand the society that you're living in. And politics plays a big role in development in India. It plays a huge role, you know. So you need to know about politics. And this is where my uphill battle, to use your terminology, is to tell young architects, institutions that teach architecture, people who I work with as consultants, whether it's energy, water, whatever, is to say architecture is not a profession that is only looking at design. An architect and architecture is is actually a vocation and not a profession, a vocation that brings integration. So on a conceptual level, architects need to know much more than design, and they need to know much more than technology and software and other things. Architects need to know, learn, and be interested in politics, sociology, environment, biogeography, technology, nanotechnology, you know, evolutionary biology, and all these things. And it's true. I mean, I'm the kind of person, maybe it's because I'm challenged in other areas, I'm extremely talented to understand on a conceptual level any subject. Give me a subject in 10 days, I can actually talk to you about how the conceptually that subject works. So I can then work with experts. Today, segregation between client, architect, architect, structural engineer, MEP, AC fellows and all. We have segregated it and we have compartmentalized it, and we allow people to make decisions independently of each other. And this is one of the main challenges of sustainability. So when you work with clients, is to tell them, no, you cannot just go to this consultant or that consultant. We have to work as a team. We have to work with a responsible set of decision making, which is part of a process and not punctual. And the young architects and interns, and we also run a 2-year program after which they can go into their graduate studies. I try to get them to read, which is very difficult because the social media generation is used to looking at few words and swipe.
True.
They cannot read more than 2 or 3 words in a line. They don't even read the whole line. But focusing on reading and keeping information in your mind allows you to perceive things outside and around you and inside you, and identify different things that are going on and start connecting the dots.
Right.
Everything is connected, and you have to be sensitized to know where the connections happen. And to know where the connections happen, you have to know more than just design tools and design language.
Yeah, understand. Thank you, Architect Suhasini. So before I jump into Architect Siritip's response, I want to remind everyone we have a Q&A box that you can just send in your questions. I'm sure a lot of you have burning questions. I think half of us don't read enough. I think this is a great time that, we just put in more questions so we can listen instead of reading. I think it's also a great opportunity to learn. I think Siritip, over to you. What is your uphill battle in this journey of yours, especially in this GreenDwell 10 years-ish?
I think I haven't set up a company for a long time. I think 10 or years or so. I think it's just, you could say it's the beginning. But even in the early beginning of our company, I think what we faced is that people did not know, you don't say no, but people were not aware of green design. But then we started our company saying, hey, we would like to do green design because it was somehow already defined at the time. So we had problems connecting with the clients as to how they perceive green design or sustainable design versus what we think it should be. So we had problems there because when clients came to us during the first few years, they came to us with the idea that, hey, we want an energy saving house. We want an energy saving, I don't know, school buildings or office buildings. So it's the only thing that they're focusing in. So we had to sort of had a kind of a small workshop with them to tell them, to explain that, okay, this is what we do, this is what we believe in, and this is how we work. It wasn't, we wasn't really able to persuade them that much during the first few years because we didn't have enough projects to show. But then as we work, we're trying to keep records of what happens after occupancy. We talk to the clients after, let's say, they move into the building, what happens, and so we could improve our process. Once we started to have that documented down, we use that as a tool to communicate with future or potential clients as to, okay, this is how we work. And once we go through that workshop, they would know that, okay, if we're not the ones that they want to work with, because, oh, this is not what we expected, then they would. I think that's really good because we both don't waste two parties' time. And then we start to have clients who understand what we do. We don't expect them to understand everything that we do, but we love to work with clients who share the same core value or core belief. That help the work process to be not smooth, but it helps that they understand our process, and it leads to actually a better product at the end. So, and that is why we love to work with homeowners. Our office projects, we did for design projects, we are working with mostly residential buildings, homeowners. We do work with a few developers, but I have to say that it's harder. We work on small or medium office buildings, and schools are projects that we love to work with. I personally love to work on school projects. What we found is that I think similar situations in Thailand is that it is tough to persuade corporate sector if you don't have economic return to show them like how much return I'm going to get, except for the cases where they intended, or there is a goal that this building would have to meet a certain green building certification. That's a totally different case. In that case, you could do whatever you want because they need to follow to get the score. So at least you feel like you're doing something good. Then, even though they're sort of hunting for scores, but at least they're still doing something. And during their decision making, this is the emphasis that they need to focus on. But for corporate sectors that they are not pursuing any certification, they just came to us that say, okay, there's sort of a goal that we need a certain green building, and then it makes it a bit harder to persuade them into doing what we would like to do unless you have a certain payback or whatever. So that's why I love to work with small to medium office buildings or schools, because you're actually dealing with those who are going to spend their time in the building. You're dealing with the office staffs. When we go and interview the clients, they get all the team to sit in and they talk to us about what kind of space they wanted, what were the bad things in their existing office buildings that they would love to change. Some do not like air-conditioned space, workspace, and how do you go at it? And I think it's really good to work with these types of clients. Although budget-wise, it may not be as high as those bigger projects, but you do learn a lot of things by working with them. And once you finish one project, you have new set of data or inspiration to go on to another project. And I found it especially true for private homeowner, because especially after this COVID-19, and we also have a pollution, the PM 2.5, you don't persuade them with economic return, but you persuade them with well-being, which was never a factor when corporate sector would make a design decision making. When I tell them that, okay, if you do this, it would actually help your well-being. You would have a better air quality, you have more access to natural ventilation, you have more access to daylight, no heat is coming in. So you could talk to them and persuade them better, and they understand better, and they make an informed design decision. So I think it's a really comforting thing to work with these homeowners, and which is a different design decision making factors between the two types of clients. So, but hopefully, what I wish for after COVID-19, we have more clients who are in different sectors who are more interested in well-being, because they now know that, let's say after PM 2.5, you know that in your office space, you need a better air quality for your staff to have, a better productivity. So I wish for better, but it is bad that we have all these kind of things, but some good things come out of it is that people have more awareness to these kind of things. So I think it's better.
Thank you, Architect Siritip. So I think the common theme between both your appeal battles is really filtering the right people, guiding them through an informed decision process, and then decide if they're the right client, and then if they are, proceed. If they're not so much, So yeah, no, I think this is something I think a lot of young designers and architects need to hear from you personally. I think this experience is very real. It's not something theoretical you just learn from school. There's no one chapter in school that tells you how to convince clients, right? So so it really is a combined experience and a combined expertise and concept that about the world, politics, economy, etc. And then you synthesize it into your own individuality as an architect and as a designer, right? So that's amazing. Our first segment has come to an end. I know there's so much information for our audience. Don't worry. We'll do a summary for you at the end of the session. So don't worry, then just keep your questions coming. All right. Now we'll go into our Q&A session. All right, everyone. I have some questions. That I've collated. Let's start with the very first question that came through YouTube Live. Hi, everyone on YouTube Live. This is directed to both our speakers. What is your idea of sustainability in vernacular architecture? Yeah, who would like to pick it up first? Over to you.
Siritip, you want to go?
It's okay, AR Suhasini, you can go first.
Oh, you guys are so kind.
Okay. The question itself is a bit strange, because anybody who understands what vernacular architecture means would not actually ask if sustainability is part of vernacular architecture. Because what is vernacular? Vernacular is a form of expression that comes from a certain region, and it has a very distinct way that it is interpreted, because it's based on the climate, it's based on the local skills and technology, it's based on the material, it's based on the culture. So the minute you're doing all that, it's culture, sociology, skills, technology, climate, building materials, you are sustainable. Otherwise, modern architecture, postmodern architecture, international style, all these were separated out of a region, separated out of a context, separated out of a culture. They wanted to have something which was universal, where whether it's in Cape Town or in, I don't know, in Coorg in the mountains of India, or whether it is in Cambodia, it would all look the same, the building. And of course, then it's not vernacular, it's in the international style. Vernacular, by its very nature of the word, means being in context. And if you're in context, you have no other choice but to be sustainable. So in a way, the question answers itself.
All right, thank you. So I think that's great. I think Siritip don't have to add on. I think that's perfect. Thanks for just summing it up as usual, Architect Suhasini. I do have one question that's directed directly to Architect Siritip. Is they would like to know about your opinion about other professional roles and responsibility towards sustainable design. So I think more than just an architect. So I think what you can do is you can break it down from two perspectives, because I think you came from the best of both worlds, both as a consultant before and now you are practicing. So what is the role and responsibility towards design that a professional should carry? So we do have a mixture of students, architects, professors, lecturers here. So yeah, you can just share as many angles as you want, so that everyone gets a clear picture. Not a picture, it's not really a picture, it's more of your version of your version of responsibility. Yeah.
Okay, maybe from my experience and my perspective, because I'm sure that when you talk about today's sustainability, there are so many professions related to sustainable design. So I would just talk about design, the design part of it. Aside from architect, if you are interested in sustainable design, and let's say you are pursuing some degree in sustainable design, or you would like to gain some sort of certification, I'm sure there are a lot of career paths that you could do these days as compared to many years before. And what I used to work on is that there are two more, you could say, professions that you could look at, and one is sustainable design specialist. And this is like when I was working in an architectural design firm, they might need some in-house sustainable design resource, or you could also open up your own consulting firm, which is sustainable design specialist. These specialists could help in certain areas of design. I'm sure that as an architect, you need to know a lot of things, like AR Suhasini was saying. Then the trend in my country that I'm seeing right now is that there are some companies which provide such a service. For example, if they are architectural design firms which would like to pursue sustainable design project, but they do not have an in-house resource, they might have never done that before, so they are looking for some specialists who could help them achieve that. And this leads to another career, is the consultant for a certain green building certification. And for some projects or for some firms which have past experience with it, they may not need this consultant. But I would use an example from my country. We don't have many architectural design firms who are experienced with getting this green building certification. So they find it more convenient to hire a separate consultant for this job. So if you would like to pursue this career path, you might need to get certain certification, and you might need to get an internship, have some mentor to help you do that. This is another interesting career path for you, because doing this, you would get to help other project teams, help different building developers under different building types to pursue green building certification, which I think that is also an interesting thing to do. But by saying this, these different career paths, I think you should compare it with what you like, because it requires different skills. For example, if you're doing the green building consultant, you need to also be the one who are coordinating. You are like a project manager, but you would work as a project manager for a green building project. So I think that's a really different thing than you would do if you are doing an architectural design job. I'm not sure if this answers your question or not, but these are based on my experience. These are something you could do aside from research. That's another thing. Yeah,
thank you. I think it definitely answers in terms of the practicality and also the career path that a person can take down the sustainable path, aside just being an architect or a designer. I do have a bunch of questions here. Everyone, I'm just going to reiterate. Don't worry, these questions will be addressed in segment 2 when our speakers address their favorite projects and how it works. Okay, so a few of us ask, for example, the average upcoming urban dwellers in India tries their very best to emulate a Western lifestyle. So have you ever designed buildings in core urban areas that has a positive impact for India? So this is directed to architect Suhasini, which you will address later anyway in your project. And then someone asked about, I don't quite understand this, but I'll try my best. This is a person who is interested in interior design and product design. And would both of you recommend any kind of design techniques or any design tools or any devices, very specifically devices, I'm not sure why, to encourage behavioral change in consumers? What can trigger them to become greener, or like, is there I'm not sure if it's a relevant question in this sense. I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly as well. So it's essentially, this is not in the group, it's not in the chat group, Siritip. I know you're looking at it. This just popped up just now. Everyone just decided to send me like gazillion questions. I'll come back to this. I will talk to the person and then we'll get back to it. And then another person asked me, what are the determinants, which means the determining factors for a pro-ecological industry development? Do you have your own benchmark, or in your own opinion, what would determine a sustainable, a pro-ecological industrial development that is 100% or 110% ecological friendly? Or there's no such a thing. I wouldn't know. Architect Suhasini, would you like to take up? Or it's or based on how Auroville is designed, maybe you can share how Auroville. There's no, what happened to your mic? Oh no, did the cyclone hit you already?
No.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, for some reason my unmute was not working.
Oh no, welcome back.
Yeah, happens, technology. Okay.
Yes.
I must say honestly, I did not understand this question in a way, because I would say what I understood from the question is, this person is asking, is there a way to create an object or a design or a process that automatically makes somebody become more sustainable? Is that what the question is about?
Yes, I think it's to trigger people, like a behavioral shift.
Because if there is such a process or product or object that is available or even can be innovated, I think Elon Musk would already be doing it, because this is what the world needs, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when we come to sustainability, like I already explained earlier, this cannot be distilled into one act, thought, or tool. It is a whole cycle of being that we need to do, which will be different for different people in different places, in different situations. So we cannot, for once in our life, we cannot say, this will make the change, or this will help us to become more sustainable. Sorry, there is no magic solution. There's no silver bullet. You have to try, and you have to be very flexible to know that what is sustainable today may not be sustainable tomorrow. Because everything is constantly changing. Because wood in India was considered to be a sustainable material. But given the amount of deforestation, even recycled wood is not sustainable anymore. So there's no silver bullet, sorry.
I think it's an evergreen and ever evolving, because I think mankind is also ever evolving. Yes. Just to reiterate what our both speakers were trying to say is, the tools and the designs and the techniques that we have is just a means to us achieving sustainability. But sustainability comes from us, our willingness to work with the resources that we have, our willingness to learn about what is sustainable today and what is sustainable tomorrow, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, speakers. So I hope that addressed you. Like, if you can't rely on a single tool or a single technique, I think it's an overall shift in the thought processes and paradigm and how people position sustainable in our, for example, from a consumer point of view, is how we consume. And from an architecture and a designer point of view, is how you design so that you can trigger maybe less consumption for your end users based on your design. So there's no one solution that covers everything. So there was a tough question just now, according to architect Suhasini, is how would you direct trends to encourage sustainability, especially in luxury design?
Luxury design.
I'm dying. I want to listen to this. Yes, please. Over to you, both of you, if I can.
Luxury. I mean, I would like to define the word luxury first.
Yeah.
Because luxury today, I would say luxury in the kind of consumer market economy, which is corporate driven, is actually associated with brands and with pricing. So when people talk of luxury, they're not talking about luxury in the sense of, for me, I mean, like, for me, the ultimate luxury for me as a person would be if I had no problem of time, that I owned time. I have all the time in the world to do what I want, how I want, when I want. How do I buy this luxury? You can't buy such a luxury. So if you're talking about luxury products, it's a different thing than luxury as a state of mind, you know? And for me, luxury as a product, I'm really not interested because today's luxury is tomorrow's waste. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah, but I think what the person who asked this question is trying to, I think what the person is trying to say is, how do we use our power as architects and designers to influence our end users and clients to rethink what is luxury? And if you guys have experience in that, you know, yeah.
Siritip, you want to take that?
Okay.
Plant more trees.
Let me try to answer this question. I think it is a tough question depending on what definition, how you define the word luxury. Like, yes, if you define the term luxury by the project cost or the construction budget, then I think if you define it that way, then I think as an architect, I don't have any problem designing that building. It can be whatever you want. You can use any technology that you want. But the thing you cannot change is the end user. For example, if you have a luxury resort project, we used to talk to a potential client who would like to do a luxury resort project. It costs really expensive per night, and they would like to spend a lot of money per square meter to construct that resort. And it's located in Thailand. And then they said that, okay, this room will not have any air conditioning because it would harness natural ventilation. But then what we found out later on is that that's not what the consumers want for Thailand, for Thai clients, because for the Thai clients' perception is that luxury resort means they have to be able to choose whether they want air conditioning or not because it's really hot and humid and they don't feel comfortable. So I think my take on this question is that if you define it by the construction budget, then you could integrate sustainable or in terms of technology in there, but you still cannot control the perception of the consumers. I think that's how you would. The important thing is to understand your consumer and talk to your client. Discuss with them what you mean by saying sustainable to make it really happen and to really make an impact. Because otherwise you have designed a really good building harnessing all the natural energy you can have, but then the users are not using the building the way you intended. And I think it is such a waste. So
yeah, maybe
yeah,
I can perhaps I can elaborate on behalf of both speakers from a different perspective. I teach behavior. I'm a behavioralist of sort. So I think what the person's trying to ask here is really, I'm just going to answer it anyway. So I think people define luxury very differently in this generation compared to the generation before. So it really depends contextually, who are you working with? Are you working with the people who are in their 50s, 60s? They are like the baby boomers who went through World War II, and their definition of luxury is different compared to, let's say, the Gen Zs and the millennials today, who are digital native, who are born in a different era. Everyone actually defines luxury very differently in this space. So I think what you need is, number one, context. You need to understand what your client really wants before you can guide them through in their version of luxury sustainable design. So I think it varies from audience to audience, from end users to end users. I have two more questions. Like, this is like my most exciting part of the day. This is the easy one, I think. What is the difference between smart building and sustainable building? How do you draw the line? I think architect Siritip is like your alley, definitely.
Yes, I think Siritip should answer this one. Yeah.
Okay. I think I will answer it from my perspective.
Yeah.
If you say that, if you define, I think smart building has been defined quite clearly, and sustainable. It's between sustainable and smart buildings, right? Okay. I think smart buildings should be sustainable, if that's the way to define it. If smart building is not sustainable, then I don't think it is smart. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but I think that would be my perspective on it. Because if you were to follow the guide of smart buildings guideline, you will see that the subtopic under there, those are all subtopics that are related to sustainable design in different parameters. But I think smart buildings are also, they also added the smart component or the technology component in there. So I think, I don't think there is a huge difference in there.
Yeah.
Just means that smart has to be sustainable from my point of view.
All right. So I think there's a Venn diagram and then there is a sweet spot in terms of smart and sustainable building. Thank you, Architect Siritip. So I lied when I say I have two more questions. There's more and more. Everyone's just so excited. Everyone just keeps popping in questions. I think this one is direct. I think this one can be directed to Architect Suhasini. Is especially in India, right, with booming as well. A lot of buildings are built before the whole sustainability hype. So they're there. They're old, they're there, they're not necessarily eco-friendly or they're just sustainable. So if it's a huge building and it's not very easy to move it around or renovate, how do we make a shift in terms of turning this building a bit more sustainable? You know, how would you approach this? Or you want to elaborate it? Never mind. Yeah, if you.
Yeah. Okay. So what we are talking about here, to reframe, we are saying that in India there's a huge amount of building stock that has been built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, with no idea of how to make it sustainable in terms of operation and maintenance.
Yeah.
And how do we actually now retrofit them so that they are more sustainable? Now, this is a question that is not just for India. I've been talking with my son the last few months because in UK, they're struggling with the same thing. They have tons of old buildings that they need to make sustainable, and they cannot just take down the building and build new buildings also because it's more expensive than here. What I would say is retrofitting of buildings to make them more sustainable needs to be looked at in 3 different stages. Stage 1 is, what is it that the building was built for and what is it being used for? So first, look at the function. Look at how you can improve the functional efficiency, and look at how within that functional efficiency, what are the things that you can reorganize and adapt. Second part is, how do you retrofit? Okay, sorry, I have a cold. How do you then retrofit it in a manner that you do not damage the building too much and you don't need to invest too much in terms of capital to meet this functional reorganization to make it efficient in terms of operation, maintenance, and running costs? You might need to retrofit the electrical part, you might need to retrofit the plumbing part, you might need to retrofit the windows or flooring or whatever, but you don't need to do everything if you know the functional efficiency and how to do it. And third and last part is also the external environment. Very often the building themselves are not inefficient or non-sustainable. It's because the environment in urban India especially has become very, very difficult to live with porous buildings. What I call porous buildings is where you have the windows open, where you can actually let the environment in and out, where you can have a landscape space, because air quality is poor, lack of security, the greenery is damaged. There is a lot of what you call intrusion in terms of privacy, noise, and other things. So buildings that may have been actually built for natural light and ventilation today are closed with curtains because of these aspects. So no matter how much you retrofit with double glazing and better energy systems and other things, you need to work on the environment. So the third part, which for me is actually the most important, get socially involved in your neighborhood to change the environment around. No building is an island. A building is part of a network, a neighborhood, and a society. Get involved, hands-on in your neighborhood, even if you're a corporate building. Look at the traffic, look at the waste management, look at the noise, look at the... I mean, in India, you can't live with open windows in any cities today, between mosquitoes, noise, security, air pollution, lack of visual privacy. It's impossible. So what are you going to do? Retrofit it into a closed box like a pyramid that you can get in from inside and stay with, you know, artificial light and ventilation, which is sustainable. Yeah.
Thank you, Architect Suhasini. So that ties into our next question. Architect Siritip, have you ever done post-occupancy evaluation of buildings? And then what are the opinions and the feedback from the occupants?
Well, thank you for the question. I think this question is a really good question because to me, I think sustainable buildings need post-occupancy evaluation for you as an architect to do the next project and even to make change to something to this project to make it better. So for us, we think it is a necessary part to the design process. And what we do is we may not do it in a very detailed manner as the researchers would do, but what we do is we do it in a qualitative manner, going to have an interview. And we don't just do one interview, we might do one interview after occupancy, and then another could be a year afterward. For example, the interesting thing is that you do learn a lot from doing post-occupancy buildings. You understand which design strategies work and what not based on that specific climate and context that we work with. For example, for one of the school buildings that we did, there was one kindergarten building which we're trying to enhance daylight. So we put some glazing and we tested. We run simulation that we understand, okay, you have enough daylight, you don't have any glare. But then afterwards, the teachers would like us to put on the frosted sticker on the glazing because they don't want the kindergarteners to look out of the window because they think it might affect their focus. So that's what we did because they are our client and we understand their perspective. We respect their opinion. But then for another kindergarten in the following, we also do the same thing. We have from floor to ceiling glazing. And then because the owner of this school, this is her first school that she did, so she would like to experiment with us. And then what we found out later on, after the school has been operating for a few years, is that the feedback from the teachers, they're saying that by having a clear glazing from floor to ceiling and the kids can look out into nature, it actually improves their focus. The teachers think it's because the kids think they are not trapped in the room, rather than you have some sort of opaque thing that only adults could look in, but kids cannot look out. So they love this idea. They think it helps the kids to focus more on what the teachers say. And then during recess, they get to run outside and play. So I think that's why we think this post-occupancy evaluation is really important and not just the quantitative one, like, okay, do you have the light that you want? Do you have the air quality that you want? But that's the people and the well-being side of it that would also help you in your next project.
All right, thank you, Architect Siritip. Last question for this segment. Don't worry, guys, we have another segment. And if your questions are not addressed because the speakers are going to actually talk about your questions, so don't worry about it. We'll come back to you. My last question for this segment would be, a person asked me, how would you elaborate the concept of human-centered design towards sustainable development? The linkage, I think, what the person's trying to do is.
Could you repeat that?
How would you elaborate the concept of human-centered design, as in human-centered design in problem solving, in putting people first versus sustainable development? Yeah, I know you guys mentioned a bit. I think you guys can do a recap. What's your perspective in terms of putting people and environment together? Yeah.
I would say that without humans, we do not have actually an issue of sustainability. You take humans out of the equation of the planetary evolution, things went on perfectly fine. We came in there and we made a little mess. So every question of sustainability is actually putting the humans in the center and dealing with what we do, why we do, and how we do. Whether it is in terms of buildings, in terms of production of all the goods and services we need, in terms of the politics of our system that we live with in each country, and in terms of culture and celebration and everything. So sustainability is obviously putting the human in the center and dealing with both aspects of humanity, the shortcoming, which is self-centered, self-absorbed, and ignorant, and the other aspect, which is innovative, creative, and extremely adaptable. We are one of the few species that can live from the North Pole to the South Pole, to the coast, to the mountains. You don't find any other living thing that can adapt like that. So sustainability obviously puts human beings in the center. Now, by putting human beings in the center, we also put a challenge to ourselves to work together, to collaborate. Sustainability takes, like what Siritip said, it's smart and sustainable. Smart depends on a constant prompting through technology and electronics and apps to make your environment smart enough for you to exist without too much interaction. Sustainability demands that you are interacting, being the decision maker, and taking responsibility for your action. So when you bring smart and sustainable together, you're actually telling the human being, you're not very smart, so we're going to use technology to help you, but you still have to do your bit. So sustainability actually puts the human being in the center and helps them with tools and technology and innovation to make the next step.
Thank you, Architect Suhasini. Architect Siritip, would you like to add on anything on top of?
Okay, with the human-centered design question, I totally agree with AR Suhasini. And I think, as I said before, the sustainability involves two parts. The parts that you are designing architecture to serve the people that are going to be experiencing or spending time in your space that you are designing. And on the other hand, also reducing the negative impact that that design of yours is going to have on the environment. So if you are able to strike a balance between these two, then I think human-centered design is also a part of sustainable design. You cannot separate it out of sustainable design.
All right, thank you. So it's like a big picture with everything in it, because you put humanity first, and but you also can't discount an environment, because where else would we live, right? So yeah, thank you so much for the responses. So guys, we are gonna go into our segment 2, where both our speakers are gonna share one of their favorite projects, and then they will share with you the thought process and the design process of that project, and then we'll return to your Q&A. So don't go far away, and then we'll start with Architect Suhasini. We will play the pre-recorded video. Yep, in this case.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now. I will start with, this is a project that we just recently did. It's a housing project. It's based on co-housing for young people. And why I'm excited about this project is it's one of the first times that we have tried to do 3 different things. One is that we wanted to work with how to bring about change in the way people live in housing. And the second thing that we did is India has committed itself to meeting its sustainable development goals. So we picked up different sustainable development goals out of the different 16 or 17 that is there. And we put together a group of experts from within the country and outside, and we had a one-day workshop to start looking at what are the elements that we can benchmark as a challenge, like how much energy per person, how much water per person, what kind of space we produce, how do we deal with waste, what kind of waste we produce as a society, looking at clothing, looking at living patterns, and we came up with what we called as a terms of reference with this group of experts. And using these terms of reference as our baseline, the entire project was planned and designed with looking at the topography of the site, the vegetation, the soil condition, the biodiversity, the climate, and comfort within the building materials itself. Like most of the materials in this building are recycled. We have minimized on concrete and steel completely. The gray part that you see is actually industrial waste from stone quarries. The earth walls are made with construction and demolition waste. And so we decided that we will benchmark new standards And post-occupancy of these buildings, we will monitor the temperature, humidity, the heat, the way it moves inside the building, the heat island effect over a period of 13 months so that we cover the 3 main seasons to see if our design, the terms of reference, and the way people live in it, how much overlap and synergy there is, and to use this to convince the government of India to rework on our building standards. So to be able to do that, 5 or 6 years ago, I approached the central government of India, including the Planning Commission, the Ministry of Industries, the Ministry of... So we managed after 1.5 years of lobbying to get 6 of these ministries in one room and tell them that, look, we have 6 climatic zones in this country. And each of these climatic zones has very, very different challenges. And today we have in this country one document, which is the National Building Code, as if we all live in the same geographical and climatic zone. And instead of that, why don't we actually kickstart initiating housing projects at the beginning in all these 6 climatic zones using groups of architects, put up a challenge to them saying, look at the socioeconomic, climate, building materials and other things, and set for yourself targets and get the government support to build a prototype of a housing project for people between the age of 20 and 40, because this is a generation that is going to actually have to live with a different set of parameters than what we had as a post-industrial society. And use that over a period of decade to see if new standards, new building regulations, and new way of planning could actually have an impact by allowing people to live in these social housing projects as transitional houses and co-housing, young people coming out of universities, living together, and trying to find a way to have a life-work balance and to also have more integrated communities. So this was one of my projects that it took us 4 years to get it off the ground, to convince the government, get funding, get experts involved to collaborate with us, and then actually finally building it by skill development in the local area using very low skilled workers and very minimum tools and technologies involved. And major part of the building is recycled waste. I must say that it has been very much appreciated. We got the Asia Award for it from 2A, and we had the Green Building Award from the Indian government side. So this was one of the projects that I feel we made a mark. Of course, now politically it's going nowhere because in other areas the state governments have changed and there's a little bit less cooperation between the politics and the administration. But I'm keeping it close at heart and hoping to actually keep pushing this and making sure that we get this kick-started all over the country. And this is another project that I wanted to share with all of you. It was for me a project of indulgence. You know, I had a client who gave me completely free rein. Again, the funding was from the government because it's a center for studies in Indian philosophy. And we tried in this project to really create spaces that are almost transparent because we are in a hot, humid tropical climate along the coast, and the site had beautiful trees that were amazing in terms of canopy. It was a very gentle, sloping site to create spaces that are framed in a manner that is a bit evocative of the traditional interpretations of spaces in old Indian homes, but still opening it up because we have the technology now with a little bit of steel and cement to reinterpret the spaces in a manner that you use certain patterns, a vocabulary, a grammar of living and building by infusing it with more possibilities. So like if you look at this image, all the woodwork, it has screening so that we keep the mosquitoes and the other insects out, you know, because in a hot, humid climate you have that, but you really allow the ventilation to go through. The flooring is all natural stone. The walls are made of earth and again, factory waste from stone cutting factories. All these strips of stones are actually waste that you see. The wood is all recycled wood. And the furniture and interior design, we managed to find a designer who would work with furniture that is not this kind of westernized furniture with a lot of fabric, but using jute and wood, which goes with, if you're not air conditioned, you tend to be always a bit sweaty and humid. And to have furniture that's not sticky and demanding all kind of things, where you can use the spaces barefoot, where you have minimum clothing that goes with temperature and humidity, and you have only ventilation system is your fans, and it creates a breeze which is between 3 to 5 meters per second so that you remain cool without dropping body temperature. And this, for me, was an amazing project because it's like I'm using the building itself, the design of the building is like a frame between the trees. So from one side to the other side, you just look through from tree to tree. And when you approach the building itself is like a photographic frame, of the nature. And all the circulation is then integrated with the nature around. It's not enclosed. And the spaces themselves have these muted lighting because there's two layers. There's the screen layer that prevents insects from going into the rooms that you use intensively, while you have circulation that is always outside so that you constantly during the day, because it's a kind of research building with libraries and offices and a few living spaces for the on-site researchers who stay and work with us, looking at old Indian documents on religions, philosophy, and spirituality, that they constantly move around in these spaces. So it's not like a building that's used only during daytime or buildings that are used only for conferences and seminars and get together, or building that is only used for living. It's a kind of combination between life, study, and interaction. So it was, for me, quite an exciting project. And I had a wonderful client. She's somebody who's, in her 80s and is an iconic figure in terms of Indian culture in this country. And then she called upon me and she said, okay, I want this spaces now, and this is the land. Give me whatever you want. Just give me the functions, but you do it. And it was a beautiful experience to actually have somebody who allowed you a free canvas, which I think is what every architect dreams about.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I stop sharing here.
All right. Thank you so much for your sharing, Architect Suhasini. Architect Siritip, what do you like about Architect Suhasini's work? Anything you want to share? Or
Wow.
like your appreciation or anything at all?
Well, I like everything, I would have to say, and I would hope for one time to go and visit your work in India.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope, at the end of the pandemic, we all have the opportunity to visit your project.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah, and our participants can find time to also, go to your city and then understand a bit about the local culture context and how it's relevant to design. I think traveling is a great way to be able to see different culture and different designs, So, but for now we can just do this virtually for now, But we're gonna pray, things can get better. So Architect Siritip, next is maybe you can share your project with us.
Okay.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay. I had a hard time deciding which project I was proud of, because usually I would want to talk about a school project that we did, but I think I talk about it quite a lot. And so for this time to talk about sustainability, I wanted to talk about something at a smaller scale and maybe closer to heart. So I wanted to talk about one home design in Bangkok. So it's a house in an urban area. So the owner is a husband and a wife, and they have one kid who is growing up, and there is one elderly living in house with them. They are hard workers, so this is like their hard-earned money, and they wanted to have the house for them. They came to us and they said that, okay, we were interested in your work because we wanted to have a house that probably could save some energy. So they came to us with the perception of energy, but then they know that we do green, so they hope that we could work for them and to create a house that would make them feel like they're resting in a resort, because they said that these days they've been working so hard that during holidays they would try to go or travel somewhere, but they feel that they're living in a high-rise condominium. at the time. So they feel that this is a really big transition for them. They wanted to have the home for them. And so with this idea, we had a lot of communication with the owners, and we worked using our basic design process. We integrate, some climate and context analysis, and the house was a very simple house. It was a small pocket courtyard house with natural ventilation, and the house, the site is really in a good location. It has sort of like a lake, a water view, and it's in a community that doesn't have any safety issue. So we decided to open the house onto the view of the lake, but it was on a bad orientation because it's open onto the southwest side of it. So we have been testing different options to make a massing that can be self-shaded. And then we tried to combine the functions that they wanted into a single sort of multi-purpose space. So we were reducing the usable space a little bit for them. So right now the ground floor is the living, dining, pantry, kitchen, sort of everything like connected in one area, and also the elderly area. But on the second floor are the bedrooms for them. And the image that I'm going to show you, let's see, the first one. Okay. This image, I apologize for the resolution. It may not be as good because we actually got this from the client's Instagram. So this is not the shot that an architect would take, because an architect would take, or architecture magazine, you would take a shot that maybe look at the elevation of the whole house, look more architecturally. But this is something that the client, you could say the dweller, they are taking this shot. This is from the second floor on their terrace where they love to sit here and maybe look at the evening sky. And this is I have been looking at their Instagram. I got this with permission. I asked them already to use it. So I'm just saying that it has become the house, which they intended only for saving energy. And we're trying to do our best that we can with resources that we have this is a house in quite a dense urban area. And you can see that maybe the client or the dweller's perspective or their experience might be different. How you would imagine what it would be like. And this is another image. They are not really the social media users, so they took a few shots. But I think from all the shots that are related to the house, I think only less than 10% are the image of the house itself. But mostly it is their experience when they are living in the house. This is the picture that I actually cropped out their text, but her text goes something like leaf, shade, and shadows or something like that. So this is a view from the southwest side on the terrace that they've been using. So I think looking at their Instagram photos, I was thinking that, okay, maybe clients' experience are a totally different thing that architect could imagine. When you are designing a house, you might be imagining yourself, walking in the house, you look at this and look at that and looking at how beautiful it's going to be, just as when I was a young architect or the students, I would look at architecture magazines and I would appreciate how the house would look like. But this is a perspective from a person who actually spends more than 8 or 10 hours inside the building that you design. And this is what they perceive. This is their real experience. This is another image. I think they put the text description here, something like #life, bird nest, because you're looking at, it might not be a big thing for some people, but it's a big thing for me because I've been living in an urban area. And with this tiny or small pocket green areas and this sort of the beginning of life, the nest is kind of like a house to a bird. They started to appreciate this from people who moved from condominium, from high rise to having a pocket space, green space of their own. I think this is quite a big thing. And you'll see that their focus are not how beautiful the house is right now, but it's been focusing on how they're interacting more with the space outside. This is the next photo. They were very excited to see this bird in their yard because you don't you rarely see this kind of thing, or you rarely notice this kind of thing in a house in an urban area. So it got me thinking that even a really small pocket green space that you provide, I think trees have the ecosystem of its own, you know. Once you have something green, then life would come, life can flourish, even no matter at what scale it is. When we were designing this house, we didn't have all these images on our mind, but this is what they actually, the dwellers, what they see. And they appreciated all of these kind of things, not how beautiful the house would look. And this is the last image. I asked them for permission as well, but the thing I wanted to say is that they told us that this is the place where they would come and sit after their day would end almost every day. This is a bit set up because this is for some of the video that they took, the vase and the plant, but this is where they would sit. And they told me that one thing they noticed is that they started to know the pattern of the sun, how and when the sun would start to enter. They said that they can now connect more with their neighbors, you know, because when they're sitting here looking at the lake, but they would see their neighbors come and running around, they started to know more of who their neighbors are and what they're doing, activities, time-wise and all that. And then they also said that they noticed this, that when the sun is coming in, they said they're spending more time outside rather than inside because it's not as hot as they would imagine. So there is a small reflecting pond in front of here just to sort of cool down the wind. And they have this vertical green areas to filter out the lower angle light when it comes in. So they were able to sort of tell us that, you know, during this season, I would sit here until 3 p.m. and then we would sort of retreat back into the living space. And if it gets too hot, we could turn on the ceiling fan. And then he knows that, okay, but at this different season, we would leave around this time, and then we would turn on. And he also told us that, do you know how much electricity we could reduce by staying like, you know, outside like this? We are reducing the need to turn on the AC, and our neighbors are surprised when they're looking at our electricity bills. So to me, I think that from the very beginning that the brief began as, okay, we wanted a house which could save some energy and then a house as a resort, but it has become much more to them. I think maybe when an architect designs a home, you think about something, you might think you have achieved something when maybe your house won an award. But to the owner, this is their happiness because they would be spending so many years in the house that is to come. So when you're creating an architecture in which you connect them more to the environment, or at least not blocking their relationship to the outside environment, while also considering their well-being, then they start to perceive more of what's happening around them. And it may also help you to have a more sustainable design at the end, because when you're designing anything but you don't provide them with well-being or wellness, then they may not understand what you're planning to do. And at the end of the day, you have a house. So I think this house also taught us a lot before you move on to the next project in terms of how you listen to the client's brief, how you create that, trying to make that relationship to happen. So that's why we are proud. And it also taught us that maybe what the clients or the dwellers are focusing are totally different than what the architects are focusing, because you'll see that they may not focus at the house itself, while the house is actually a place where all of this are happening. And it cannot happen without this very house.
Thank you so much, Architect Siritip. So, you know, it has been an extremely informative and personal and up-close journey with all your insights and experience. So if I may take a step back, where do we even begin applying of what we know or what we've learned into sustainable design, right? For example, Architect Suhasini, you've been practicing since the 80s. Architect Siritip, you've been to grad school, and then you started GreenDwell for 10 plus years. Let's all rewind a little bit. What if I'm in my first year of my career? Like, okay, I'm a fresh graduate and I really want to try going into sustainability. Where do I even start? How do I level up? You know, what's your methodology in leveling up, you know, in this game of sustainability? Yeah, just break down for us a little bit more, you know, if I'm interested and would like to start, where can I start? How can I start? Or how did you start, you know, so that people can also maybe imitate our journey in shaping ourselves into a more sustainable driven or centric designer or architect? Who would like to go first? Okay, Siritip first.
Oh, okay, me? Okay. Okay. I think it goes both ways. Also, you need to know more and also practice, because I think we've been asked like whether you need to read or get certificate, or do you just get your hands dirty and just start doing it. I think it goes both ways, because if you but it started with a heart. So if you think that you really wanted to do it, then I think you need to read more about what it is like. And I think the easiest to me, I think the easiest is not browsing around on the internet, but maybe try to find a well-defined framework for sustainable design. For example, your local green design guidelines could help. I think that provides like a general framework so that you would understand, okay, when we talk about sustainable design fundamentals, we talk about these very topics, and get yourself familiarize yourself with all those things. And once you know that, maybe just take an exam and get a certificate because you have been reading all of that, even though it's not that important. But I think it lifts you up a little bit, okay, now I have finished this. Then you get your hands dirty and you practice. Because I think theories are totally different than practice. And when you practice, you might feel that you would need to go and read some more about the topics that you're interested in. I think that's how, at least for me, that's how I sort of developed the knowledge, because it is fluid. It changes all the time. Technologies change, even though the why is still there, but technologies change all the time. So get yourself ready for all these things.
Yeah, this reminds me so much of the metaphor architect Suhasini used, the octopus in the circle thing. Architect Suhasini, what do you think? Yeah, what would you like to add on to this? You need to unmute your mic, yeah? Architect Suhasini,
yes,
yeah, got it.
Okay.
Okay.
What would I say to somebody who wants to actually get into designing and building more sustainably? If I'm a young architect today coming out of an institution and I'm going to set up my practice, I would say that first, one of the things I would look for is a mentor. Because many things you can learn academically, and there are things that you learn by doing, and there are things that you learn by imbibing. Because the main aspect I find interesting in life is learning how to learn. Because once you learn how to learn, you keep learning all the time, and you need different mediums and different ways of learning that you can have. Because as human beings, we are wired to learn by storytelling. We are, the first thousands of years, we just sat around a campfire and people were acting out and demonstrating and talking about going deer hunting or running away from the elephant or whatever. And that's the narrative of the word, when the tone and the texture and the language, it creates images in your head. You see, television is very successful, but at the same time, the imagery that you see in the television, if it's with soundless, it doesn't go anywhere. And only sound doesn't. So the mind creates images, and these images can come in many, many ways. I feel that a lot of sustainability issues are because we actually compartmentalize how we learn. We say, okay, when we are in academic performance thing or a setup, there are certain modules to learn, and our interests and the way it's packaged and given to us and the competitiveness and other thing, it's very good because it gives you a structure. But then when you're practicing, personally, we hardly ever say no to a project because of two reasons. No project is, bad or good. Sometimes you can do something with this, sometimes you can do something else with that. And look at every project as a challenge to say, okay, last project I was able to deal with water or with climate. And you hold that in your mind and you amplify it into the next thing, which maybe you have done a storeroom now, and tomorrow you're going to do a public toilet block, and day after tomorrow it's a school. But between the storeroom and the public toilet block and the school, there's a constant learning process, you see. And that combined with academia and having mentors, and mentors not in the sense of the normal conventional traditional mentor who teaches you better, but actually you mentors in very, very different ways. Like right now, I'm learning from all of you. You're kind of mentoring me to look at life from another angle. And because of that, the next interaction I will use this learning and awareness to perceive much more, to absorb much more. So in a way, life is, of a designer, is only so much can be done academically, but the rest is exposure and experience. And exposure and experience builds awareness, awareness builds sensitivity, sensitivity builds understanding, and understanding makes you more tolerant to constantly keep evolving. You know, I have had clients that I would say, oh my God, why me? What did I do in my last life to have this karma? Okay. But no, it's true. You have clients from hell and you have clients who are wonderful. But 1 in 50 is wonderful. The rest is all learning processes, because we as human beings are the same. What I recognize in the other person as being completely mad, I recognize it because I have it in me. Otherwise, I would be blind to it. You know, I don't understand what the birds are saying because I don't have that language in me. It's the same thing. So when I always tell young people, do not think that design is in the office and building is on the construction site. And the clients are people that you meet for a few hours a week to discuss design. Your client may be the one you're designing for, but all the clients around, the neighborhood in which you're designing, you know, the people who are going to be building the building, the people who are going to be on the street just driving through and looking at your building, these are all your clients, because each one is perceiving and is being impacted by what you put in. And so somebody may pay the bill for your design work, but there are a lot of people who are paying the bills for what you don't design and you don't pay attention. And that is where sustainability comes in. Sustainability comes in not having barriers, but sustainability comes in being able to move through barriers, to permeate and move through all these barriers back and forth, and have this kind of diffusion between you as a designer, you as a person who is actually interacting with the client, and make that process, whether you are starting your own office, whether you're starting to be more sustainable, to be a sustainability advisor or a sustainability designer, or you are just going to specialize into somebody who's going to help other architects to make their buildings more sustainable, or you're going to work with the government to evaluate people's buildings, or whatever, each level of sustainability, the little interaction that you bring in becomes richer and deeper because it's diffuse. Your learning process is completely diffuse, and you never stop with one project. Every project is one more step in the ladder to keep going up and laterally. Another thing that I tell them is, look at the people who build, because I don't know how familiar you are with India. 90% of people in India are employed in the unorganized sector, which is basically agriculture and construction. There is no formalized training or practice in construction. People, when they lose their farm because there was no rain or flood or whatever, they become migrants and they become construction people. After 2 years of carrying things on their head, they become a helper to a mason, and then they become that. So these people just learn on the job. They do not know, and nobody bothers about them. So no matter how good your design is, how well you want to make sure that you don't use high embodied energy material. Finally, when it comes down to how construction is done, there's a lot of waste, there's lots of misinterpretation, and there's a lot of total lack of understanding due to an ignorance that comes from lack of opportunity to education. And we can only do so much in the office, and we can only do so much in terms of setting up the processes of construction. But finally, it comes down to the lowest common denominator of the person who's putting the sand and the cement, the person who's cutting the wood, the person who's actually welding the steel. How much waste, how much energy, how perfectly the job is done is going to impact how the building is going to be, how it's going to weather, and how it's going to be maintained. So I always tell the young architects, spend more and more time on the construction site, interact with these people, learn from them so that they can learn from you. And true sustainability is actually an integration of the entire supply chain, from the education to the practice to the client to the industry to the last person on the construction site. That's how it is.
Yeah. So it's like you mentioned, the octopus essentially is the, I think it's essentially the how holistic the whole ecosystem is from end to end. And just to recap, it's really about learning how to learn and identifying what we don't know, because we only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know, right? So I think having a constant urge of wanting to learn would be great in terms of growth, and also get the best out of both worlds, theory versus practice, right? You kind of want to have both.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't just be a pure researcher, or you can't just do pure practice. It's when you need to know when do you need to supplement which part of your knowledge and your experience.
Yes.
I think if someone were to venture into, I think this doesn't just apply to sustainability and alone, but I think as a competitive industry for spatial design or architecture or interior design, I think everyone has to go through this. And if no one tells you in university, or if your current bosses don't tell you, let architect Suhasini and architect Siritip tell you now. That is something we want you to also, consider and something to pick up. And sometimes really we don't know what we don't know, until someone tells us that.
Exactly. Completely agree with you there.
So in alignment with what we don't know, the future is full of uncertainties, especially for our designers who are maybe graduating this year or just started practice. COVID-19 has really COVID-19 at 2020 came like a typhoon and swept everyone off the floor, caught everyone off guard. And in your opinion, what kind of changes do you foresee, or what kind of changes are you currently facing that you will also want to share, like a tip or two with our audience, with our participants, how to keep our heads up, whether it's emotionally, whether it's rationally, 2020 has been quite nightmarish,
quite challenging.
Quite challenging. Yeah. So maybe from just want to hear from both of you, what you've gone through and what are you bracing yourself for 2021? Personal opinion. It doesn't have to anything at all.
I would say that this whole COVID thing has, I think, if you look at it in terms of how we have structured modern society, we've always felt that there is a way and a means that we can always distance ourselves from disasters, and based on that, the entire socioeconomic structure is built. And I look at the developed world, which is North America and Europe, except for a few countries in Europe. Somehow India is kind of copying this model without really thinking about how it affects us as people. When something like COVID happened, in a city like Bombay, there are people who are super rich, and then there are all these people who are servicing the rich and the middle class and upper middle class. And who are these people who are servicing? About 45 to 50% of Bombay lives in the slums. The largest slums of Asia are in Bombay. City of Chennai, which is 160 kilometers from me, has about 35% of the population living in slums. These are the people who are building for us, who are cooking for us, driving our cars, driving the buses, cleaning the buildings, and without healthcare and education, no matter how much you do the lockdown and isolation and try to prevent the spread of the contagion, we have not succeeded. Why? Because we depend on these people to run our lives in all levels, but we do not provide them with safe living spaces, healthy food, water and sanitation, education for their children, you know, and security of livelihood and place to live. If you go to these slums, they live in exploited by the politicians and the local mafia because they don't have security of the land that they're squatting. And even the top Bollywood actors got COVID because their drivers and their maids come from the slums. The top politicians who isolated themselves but are completely dependent on the service provided by the unorganized sector, schools had to close down. Not because, you could not test the two students and the teacher, but they're run on the back of the 70% of this country that lives on less than $2 a day with purchasing power parity. And here, as an architect or a planner, I find that people no crisis or disaster should be unexploited. Here, I find that the crisis that we have with COVID, if we exploit it properly, we can actually come up with a more welfare-oriented society, which guarantees education, healthcare, and housing for all. Unless we do that, the next COVID will not be as gentle as it is today, or the next natural disaster with climate change is not going to be there. And this whole interaction that we have between refugees, poverty, lack of opportunity, all these things cannot be compartmentalized and separated from all our lives. We are all of us here in this program are very privileged. We are one of, if you just say 100 people in this world, we are one of the 100. We have houses, we have a profession, we have a bank balance, we know where our food is coming from, our children are safe. How many people can we say that? And I think as architects, we really need to take up our role as mobilizers of social change, whether it's through a building, any kind of building, a house for a person or a school, or this mobilizing of social change comes in from how we treat our buildings and people who build it for us and the people who service it and the people who live in it. There has to be a little bit more compassion and tolerance so that we are in a more shared society. And I think COVID is
Agreed.
actually a very gentle hammer on our heads to say, wake up, guys. Life on this globalized planet, whether it is the amount of carbon dioxide cannot be just controlled over United States. The cutting of the forests of the Amazon is not going to prevent the climate change in other places. Same thing, pathogens and diseases are not going to respect your borders and your nationalities and your currency exchange. Sorry, it is not going to happen. What affects me today is going to affect everybody else, and what affects them will affect me. And there, as planners and architects, using design as our tool, we really need to look at social change and how we work with each other. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Architect
Thank
Suhasini.
you.
Architect Siritip, over to you.
Okay. I think my view, what I have seen so far in terms of, especially in terms of design practice, is that this COVID-19 thing, I think it has been sort of disrupting the business quite a lot. You see projects halting because it affects the economy. So a lot of projects are sort of halting or holding because they would rather spend their money to maintain their staffs for now, rather than building a new head office building. What I think is that one of the big thing that I think I have seen is that with all these commercial projects halting, maybe except for those mega large projects, is that a lot of people are rethinking how their home should be like. I think home is a part of building type that has been rethought not by architects, but by those who live there. Like how they perceive their home, because as you're working from home, you started to realize, hey, this is not a comfortable place for me to work or to live or to spend 24 hours here without being able to go anywhere. So I think this disruption has come, but has the architect or the designers prepared for this? Or I have seen some of the forums being started right now discussing about this topic, but I think in the future I have hope that we would see more designers to think about this, because this is not temporary, because it's going to come. More is going to come, because if we're not changing how we live today, then all these things are going to be more and more frequent, especially those related to climate change, but also pandemic. So if we, as architects, I think we need to understand the impact that what we do can have onto the health and well-being of those who are going to spend time inside your building. Maybe our rating system, our building code would have to be updated for all of these, because most of the things I can see now are temporary solutions. But this has been going on for a year now. So there has to be something more than that, policy-wise, that comes into how we rebuild. And I think it is more urgent than we think, because right now we're, researchers are going for vaccines, going for the best medicine for cure. But how about us as architects? What can we do? What are we capable of? I think we can take a big part in this, because we are shaping the way to a certain extent on how people live, how people work, how people would stay safe and healthy and well inside a building. So what I think is that more and more will be discussed about, indoor environmental quality, have access to daylight and view. Those who live in a house where you have really bad access to daylight, or when they're really suffering, and it's really depressing for them.
Yep.
So I think we need to come to realize the role that we can play, the impact that we can make. But I do have high hopes. And on another side of the story is the environment. You can see that once we are under quarantine, you see a lot on the news that, nature is flourishing. You see rare fishes are coming out, turtles are coming out to lay eggs, you see those trees and those animals. I think nature is actually resilient in certain extent until human, you destroy all those balance. But then once you give them some time, they're able to come back. And once you realize this, it gives me hope that, okay, if we change the way we live, or architects, if we rethink about the way we design, then you can have that impact. You can still make it happen, turning the tide. We still have time. So it gives me hope, although a tiniest hope, but I think that's how much we can impact. So I would like to speak to the newer generations that, you can have more impact than you think you can, because we depend on your generation to come, and we have high hope in you.
Yeah. Before we wrap up this session, this segment, and go into our next Q&A session, I would really like to thank Architect Siritip, Architect Suhasini for your time, because for Architect Siritip, you've been with AYDA for many years as a judge, as a mentor, and Architect Suhasini, I hope from here onwards we can get you on board to be part of the AYDA network, is because Nippon Paint and AYDA has spent at least the past 12, 13 years trying to raise designers and architects with a heart, whether it's for the people, whether it's for the environment, it depends on what your interest is. But as long as at the end of it, we deliver positive impact to the communities that we're working with, and to the end users that are going to use the facilities that we designed for them, I think it makes the whole journey worthwhile, So I'm really, really grateful that, we're able to do this session today. And
I'm also,
and then from
My
here,
pleasure.
I hope, thank you so much, so much. And I really hope, whoever is participating in this session on YouTube Live and Zoom, ask all the questions you can ask. It is not a very common opportunity. We can get two amazing ladies on board. So keep your questions coming, and then we'll go into our next Q&A. Yep. So big bravo to our panel of today, Architect Suhasini and Architect Siritip. Thank you so much. And then we're now going to jump into our Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
All right, guys. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you everyone for your time. Quick one, Architect Suhasini, this question I think is directed to you. It's a combination of two people's question. Number one is, the average urban dwellers in India emulates the Western lifestyle. How would you describe, have you ever designed green buildings in core urban areas, and what has been the impact in terms of people's well-being, or in terms of people's perspective towards sustainable design or a greener lifestyle? That's the first one. The second one would be, how is the concept of sustainability being perceived by the people of India from your experience and insight? Yeah, and sorry, one more. Guys, I have a poll as well. You can ask questions. And then for the rest who text me privately, I will get back to you as soon as I can. So over to you, Architect Suhasini.
Okay. Technically, I have never designed a green building because in India, when they talk about green building, they're talking about certification, you see. So there are three forms of certification in India. There's the Indian Green Building Council, then there is the Terry Griha, and then there is one more, I don't remember which one. But these are what is classified technically as a green building. Well, and I have been on the steering committee of the Indian Green Building Council, but I have never wanted to design a green building which needs certification because I do not believe that sustainability is, how do you say, can be rated, counted by points, and then you can just say, I have it, so now I'm green. Because this allows people not to take continuous responsibility post-occupancy. So they leave the aspect of green building to the architect and the designer to fulfill during the process of design. And then post-occupancy, which is actually the larger part of the building. You might design a building for 1 year, you build it over 2 years, but that building is going to be around for 30 years. And the 30-year time scale, the impact of it to the 1 year or 1.5 years, it's kind of, or apples and oranges. So I have never designed green buildings, which are certified, but we have done sustainable buildings, and not in what we call the metropolises of India, which is the 5 main metropolis, but we have done it in cities like Coimbatore, Chennai, and other places. And the impact of it, I would say, is one of the first things is that when you design a green building, and I mean sustainable building, it tends to look different, whether you want it or not. It does look different because in terms of the windows, the shape of the building, how it sits on the site, and the materials and textures. So people start to notice it. If you have had clients that you have educated and have made aware of what you're doing, they become ambassadors to explain to the other users, the friends, the guests, and the people who come because if it's a corporate structure or a school or whatever, what it is all about. Why do you have this kind of wall? Why are the windows so deep set in? Why don't you have so much more glazing? Why is your landscape looking dry in the summer and then quite lush in the monsoon? Why is it not always looking the same throughout the year? So your clients, your users, the society around become partners in the 90% of the building's life, which is part of the sustainable design. So for me, sustainable design, I have done it in cities, but I have done it in a way that the people who use the building continue to live in it sustainably.
Thank you so much. This would be I think someone needs a further elaboration from either one of you, is how do we turn ideas and concepts into practical design? It's pretty difficult, I think, especially for newbies. Not newbies, I mean people who just started practicing. Apologies for my language, everyone. Yeah. So, how would you advise or how would you give like maybe solid step 1, 2, 3? I think this is in line with the elaboration of your favorite project just now, number 1, correct? And number 2 would be a matter of how would you educate clients and end users, right? So if you guys can just break it down for me one more time, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
You guys are so cute. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the first question about change, about how to evolve from design to turning it into reality.
Concept into reality.
From concept to reality. Well, I think concepts are still concepts, but what makes it real is turning into construction. I think that would be my take on it. Let's say if I say for newbies, I think that would be that would be a bit hard to answer, but I would say that I could say it from my perspective and on the way that I work. Process-wise, all concepts, we need your concepts, no matter how fancy it would be, because those are new ideas. Those are your creative take onto how to solve the design problems. So I think not all concepts are bad or unreal, but I think the process that you could take it into reality for sustainable design project is that you need to integrate a certain research into it. Or maybe for some of those concepts, do you back it up with the knowledge of the climate or context characteristics or not? For example, you would have some, you could say you have some crazy ideas about how to solve this drought problem in your design. How do you deal with that? And if you read, you have some background knowledge, and then you come up with maybe a few ideas, but those are plausible. They're all plausible because it is from some background knowledge. But then after that, if you integrate some research in there, you could test whether that would work or not. It could be from simulation. It could be from making up some mock-up full scale and tests. But that is how to turn it into reality. And don't stress yourself out that, okay, this concept that I have is really, it's too surreal. It may not work. I'll just pause on that, because we need those ideas to make the world move forward, because we cannot stick to the same old solutions and assume that it's going to work under every context. So I think you just have to practice. And as I'm saying, for me, I'm still learning from my past projects for some of the ideas that we think may not work. But after we finish the project, then we find out, okay, whether this works or not, what would be the next path to take if similar problems were to occur? How would you take on it in your next step of your project? I used to work with projects where I am only a part of conceptual to design development, but never construction. Those are never realized because you have never took part in the construction and you don't know what is going to happen there. But if you take part from design from the start and finish that loop right through construction, then you are taking another step forward to your learning towards a new project. I think that answers the question.
I think that answers.
Okay.
Architect Suhasini, would you like to elaborate or add on if there's anything?
No, I think Siritip really covered it. I think that is quite comprehensive what she said.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it's a matter of bringing our thoughts into action. Try to. I think I can address from a new practitioner point of view is if you can't do 100% of your concepts, start with 10%, and then inch in from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40, and then one day you'll become like Siritip and Suhasini. Ta-da! So I think it does take a lot of effort and learning a lot of different aspects of design and economy and politics and etc. and culture and context, and then put it all together into a built structure. All right. Unfortunately, I have no more questions for anyone. Everyone seems quiet. I think we have I think it's pretty productive. And for everyone who's online, don't worry about it. So what we're going to do is the Asia Young Designer Awards team is going to turn all these conversation into written words. So you can have a bit of learning materials or a reference to read based on what Architect Siritip and Architect Suhasini has responded to us. We also have a poll at the moment before everyone moves. We want to learn from you, what would you like to listen, what would you like to learn more in your next period? Like today we talked about sustainability, the previous session we talked about empathic design. So I want to hear from all of you what you want to hear more next time. So before we go, can I invite everyone to switch on your video so we can do a virtual photo shoot, because we can't see each other until probably when COVID ends. So I'd like to invite everyone to turn on your video so that Architect Siritip and Suhasini can see your faces too. Hello. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending your time with 2 hours with us. I hope this session is helpful. And if it's too quick for you to absorb, don't worry. We have the recording on YouTube, and we also have notes for you to refer pretty soon. And then we'll drop you an email. And for countries, I have a few students who texted me just now. They were a bit upset that they couldn't join this year's Asia Young Designer Awards because of COVID. Don't worry, next year around March, April, June, July, we'll be launching again in all 16, 17 geographical locations across Asia. And if you have questions, just reach out to our local team, or you can just reach out to us. We will always be here to serve you. once again, on behalf of Nippon Paint and Asia Young Designer Awards, I have to thank Architect Siritip and Architect Suhasini for your time. And I also have to thank the cyclone that doesn't hit India yet, so that we get Architect Suhasini here live with us. If not, we won't be able to see you.
It's there.
It's there. It's almost here, right?
Yeah, I can see the whole thing going like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really hope these sessions are helpful for whether you are a student, you are currently teaching, you're currently practicing. Yeah, I'm just really hope we can do more for you. Nippon Paint and the Design Awards platform can do a lot more for you. Yeah. Is that everyone on the video? Can everyone show yourself? Don't be shy. All right. Yay. Hello, everyone. We also have a post, what's it called? What is it called? A post webinar survey so that we can serve you better. Okay, is that everyone? I have like 77 people here. I'm pouting, please. Show yourself. Things I do to get my job done. All right, is that all? The rest don't want to show yourself? Oh. All right, Mel, are you ready to take the picture? Okay. I love how a lot of us are very well dressed even when we're at home. I'm usually in pajamas, in all honesty. Yeah. All right.
Brendan, there was a question in the group.
Oh, there's a question in the group. Yay. Where's the question? Oh, life has changed completely. How can we maintain a relationship between nature and machine life? This is our friend from Iran asking our speakers. Machine life. What do you mean by machine life here? I think what Kimia means is
I suppose the person means how do you keep a relationship between nature and technology?
And built structure as well, I think, like man-made. Yeah.
And nature and technology, or a built environment, between the nature and the built environment, right?
Yeah. Yes. I think so. Yeah. Architect Suhasini, would you like to take it?
What you would consider to solve it? How do you keep a relationship between nature and the built environment? First, I think post-COVID, we have all realized that we cannot rely on artificial ventilation to have a healthy environment. We know now that clean air is more than just machine-cooled, filtered air. There are things that are beyond what machines can do for us. And between the built and unbuilt environment, the interface that happens to have a healthy combination, that we as human beings are still in connection with nature around us, and yet have the protection that we need from nature, because we don't have fur like animals and we can't live in a cave. We still need shelter. How to have a shelter that is simple, sustainable, and appropriate to the context we're living in. This requires a co-education between designers, architects, planners, and the people we build for. Because it cannot all be only left to the hands of the architects and designers. Make me a sustainable building, make me a sustainable city, make me a green city, or a smart city. Like India, we are doing this smart city business. It needs smart human beings, and not smart human beings with data and machines, but smart human beings in terms of looking at situations, evaluating, adapting, and interacting with it. And that's when you will have a relationship with nature and built environment. How much can you do inside the building? And like if you remember the photo that Siritip showed in her projects, these two people sitting in the veranda, looking out. And she talked about how much more time they spend outside the building than compared to what they did. But because she could build the building in such a way that when they needed shelter, they were there, but other times they're outside in nature. See? And re-establish this relationship. Sorry. Okay?
Yes, I think that answers. Thank you so much. Okay, so everyone can say cheese to the camera. Melody, are you ready?
Yeah, is everyone, okay, I think more people are coming
We'll do one more time. Okay, one last call if you want to appear in our beautiful photo. So that
We'll seconds count down. So 10, 9, 8, 7.
There are more now.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1.5. Because I feel like more people are coming in. Okay, 1.5. Okay, so I think that's it. All right, I'm gonna click 1, 2, 3, go. All right.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. We have a survey before you guys leave, so don't leave yet. Oh, some people left already. Thank you, Architect Siritip and Suhasini. Please stay safe. Please take care. One of you have an injury. One of you have
My
a cold.
pleasure.
So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
We'll
Thank
now share
you.
thank you. We'll now share a QR code. Feel free to do the survey so that we can serve you better. I'll see you guys again. Please take care and remember to join the next Asia Young Designer Awards in 2021. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Please take care.
Bless you. Please take care. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.